We're on to National Q&A Part 4 that you just read through. And we're going to talk about it here in this video. And we're going to start, as promised, with a few financing questions. On the exam, you'll have 8 financing questions. And then on calculations, yes, this is math, you will also have 8 test questions. And a lot of those will be around these concepts. It'll be the math around these definitions. So you might see a little overlap there. First of all, what is a promissory note? In our situation for financing, it's a contract between the borrower and the lender being the bank. But a promissory note by definition is simply a promise to repay a debt. A point is 1% of what amount? This is around discount points. And a discount point is 1% of the amount borrowed. Now, how do we calculate the amount borrowed? Well, we take the loan to value, which is the amount the borrower or buyer is putting down as a down payment versus the amount that they're borrowing. So you might see a 90% loan to value. That means they are putting 10% down. They are borrowing 90%. Again, where do we do those calculations off of? Well, it's going to be either the purchase price or the appraised value, whichever is less. So if you've got a purchase price of 200 and the appraised value comes at 200 or more, you can use the purchase price. But if the purchase price is 200 and the appraised value comes in at 195, now the lender can only calculate all the payments, everything off of 195. Interest-only loans are known as straight loans. A mortgage factor chart where you're figuring principal and interest. You're going to use that mortgage factor chart, and it's going to be based on the amount borrowed divided by 1,000. You'll use that factor number and multiply it by the mortgage factor number. The mortgage factor number is determined by the term of the loan, which is the length of the loan and the interest rate. It'll give you a mortgage factor number, and you'll multiply that by the number of 1,000s they're borrowing. Mortgage factor charts will be available for you at the test center. If you're testing from home, it will also be available for you. They will provide it on their online system. At the test center, it is actually printed, laminated, and taped to the desktop, from what I've seen. To avoid a foreclosure, a seller may do a deed in lieu. This is also known as a friendly foreclosure. And in a short sale, which is more, the sales price or the payoff of the loan? It's the payoff of the loan. They're selling it short of what they owe to the bank. The primary mortgage market is the one who originates or creates a loan. It's not refinancing. It's not a home equity line of credit. And then the major player in the secondary mortgage market is Fannie Mae. They buy up a lot of conventional FHA and VA loans. And the secondary mortgage market, their function is to buy blocks, large quantity of these mortgages from the primary mortgage market. And then that frees up those banks to go out and create new loans. It's the circle of the mortgage life. Private mortgage insurance. This is used when a borrower puts less than 10% down on a conventional loan. Another type of mortgage insurance for FHA and VA loans, because FHA is only 3.5% down. That is not private mortgage insurance. It's actually a government insured loan. So PMI really applies to conventional loans with less than 20% down. The borrower pays for that insurance, but it does not protect against them if they lose a job. It actually protects the lender in case they default on the loan. And then again, those government-backed loans or government-insured loans are FHA and VA. FHA is governed by HUD. VA is governed by Department of Veteran Affairs. A developer acquires a large parcel of land and wants to break it down into individual lots. A blanket loan is going to be their best opportunity. And truth in lending enforces the fact that the consumer, buyers and sellers, but especially buyers, need to know the true cost of obtaining a mortgage and exactly what fees are involved, including an interest rate and any other closing costs. And this regulation is heavily influenced by Regulation Z. Now, we've talked about the Equal Credit Opportunity Act with fair housing around redlining. And yes, this creates protects race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, and receipt of public assistance. The marital status and receipt of public assistance, a little bit different than what fair housing protects. RESPA, does it allow kickbacks and non-disclosure of true closing costs? No, that is their whole point. The consumer has got to know the true cost of obtaining credit, and the lender cannot give a referral fee to the agent. That is known as a kickback. And it's a big no-no, big no-no. Now we're going to get a little into appraisals, it looks like. And on the appraisal or valuation and market analysis section, you will have 6 test questions. Market price and market cost do differ. Market price is based on data. Market cost is based on rebuild. But keep in mind, what the appraisal is doing is looking for market value. It's the most likely price that a seller is willing to sell and a buyer is willing to purchase, again, based on data. There are several basic principles of determining value: anticipation, change, competition, contribution, highest and best use, increasing, diminishing returns, plottage, regression, progression, substitution, supply and demand. Anticipation, I want to hit a few of these. Anticipation is the effect on value based on an event happening or not happening. So Amazon decides to build a fulfillment center in your town. Values as anticipation grows about more job opportunities, so can the values of the property. What if the local manufacturing plant closes, though? That could cause values to dip. So when a seller asks when's the best time to sell, the local manufacturing plant is closing now before everybody else finds out. Change is the idea that properties deteriorate over time if they're not maintained. Competition is basically how much inventory is on the market and how quickly is it selling. Contribution is going to have to do with upgrades and features to the properties, such as the value of adding a pool versus updating a kitchen. Highest and best use. This is usually the first step in the appraisal process, is to define the problem. Is this property being used for its highest and best use? That's why there's not a hog house next to the governor's mansion, right? There's other pretty houses. Increasing and diminishing returns. My best example for you of this is you can over improve a property. You can outprice by upgrading your property. You could outprice the market. So doing upgrades is great, but based on the market and based on your location, there maybe is a max out value. And at some point, the things you do as improvement are just for your enjoyment. Plottage is the idea that we take 2 lots, and by combining them into one lot, it's worth way more in value than they were separately. Regression and progression. My best way of describing this is there is a sliding scale between size and condition. So let's say we've got two homes priced for $200,000. Each of them is priced for 200 grand. One has 3,000 square feet and one has 1,000 square feet. What does logic tell us is probably going on with those properties? Well, according to the principle of regression and progression, that 3,000 square foot is probably going to need some love, attention, and updates. With a 1,000 square foot house is going to be an apple pie condition with lots of upgrades and renovations. Okay. Substitution. This is really how you do a comparative market analysis in your career. Is you take three comparables, or how many? Let's just use three as an example. You got three comparable sales that we use to analyze your subject property that you're looking to list. And we decide, are these comparable sold properties better, worse, or the same? And if they're better, we've got to make them look average or poor, like this subject, and decrease value. If they're in worse condition, we've got to make them look average or better and add value. So we're making adjustments to the comparable sold to make those properties look most like the subject property. And then supply and demand. This has to do with when demand goes up and inventory is low, prices go up. We usually call that a seller's market. When demand is low and inventory is high, prices go down. We typically call that a seller's market. The value approach used with recent sales used to determine a subject property's value, that's usually focused around the principle of substitution. This is called the sales comparison approach, which works great for residential real estate. The cost approach is going to work really good for very unique properties, commercial, industrial, or even residential, where maybe you've had a church converted to a home. The cost approach starts with taking the property back to bare land, adding in the value to rebuild it. But obviously we're not reselling new construction, so we've got to bring that value down based on three depreciation factors: physical deterioration, functional obsolescence, and external obsolescence. Physical deterioration is going to be basic wear and tear, easy to fix. Functional obsolescence is going to be things that are just undesirable because of how the property functions. There's something inconvenient about it. The example I've probably given you previously is a 3-bedroom home versus a 3-bedroom home where you've got to walk through one of the bedrooms to get to another. Those are not going to be the same value. And then external obsolescence is, what is something off that property in the neighborhood that is maybe a nuisance or that makes that property undesirable? Okay. Who administers this RESPA that we've been talking about? That is HUD. And with RESPA and Regulation Z, they are the ones that regulate this closing disclosure and the loan estimate forms. And both of them, you must have 3 days for the buyer to review. Okay. A leasehold estate with a definite period of time. This is going into leases. You'll have 2 lease questions on the exam. Which type does not require a notice to be given by the tenant? And that is a tenancy for years. It's for a definite period. On a gross lease, who pays the taxes or insurance? That's the landlord or the owner. A net lease, the tenant pays everything: rent, utilities, taxes, and insurance. And you might be thinking, why would they pay all of that? Well, if they pay it, it's a tax deduction for them. When you rent, you not only pay down the landlord's mortgage, but then they get all the tax advantages of deducting tax and property taxes and mortgage interest, for example. Okay. Square footage, yes, this next one here. 60 by 40, you multiply those two. 60 by 40, you're going to get this square footage of 2,400 square feet. The roles of a property manager are to lease spaces on behalf of a property owner to generate income. They're going to manage vendors such as garbage removal, lawn care, snow removal, and then they're also going to do financial reports such as profit and loss and cash flow statements. The local government, they use police power to control the use of the land. They create that through zoning ordinances so that we aren't building houses right up against a manufacturing plant that maybe puts extra pollutants into the air. What could a property owner obtain if the property no longer fits a zoning class? Let's say it was zoned residential and now it's zoned commercial. They could get a conditional use permit. It's also be used if you want to apply to maybe build a worship center on an ag zoned piece of property. Restrictive covenants. This sets a standard by a developer and a homeowners association for how the property is used and maybe even the architecture and how you can use your property. It would maybe address pets. It would address style of home, minimum square footage. The real difference is, though, between a restrictive covenant and a building code is restrictive covenants are managed by either the developer or the homeowners association, whoever is still in charge. Building codes are regulated by city ordinance, and they are absolutely for safety. This goes into a little bit of property condition. You'll have 5 test questions around property condition. The way we remove asbestos safely is called encapsulation. An odorless, colorless gas that emits through our soils is called radon. How does an agent avoid liability, but also help counsel their buyers about issues related to property condition? The best way to do this is understand different elements of the property that could affect it, such as radon and asbestos, maybe even lead-based paint. Understand the environmental issues, be educated on them, look for evidence and educate your buyers, but you should never claim anything without having it professionally tested. So you can say radon is something that is very common in Iowa, very common in basements where we disturb the soil and have people live below grade, and educate them on what radon means. But you cannot confirm or deny that that house has radon until it's tested by a professional. You're not going to walk in and be like, "Ooh, my hair went flat. There must be radon." No, your trick knee isn't going to act up from high school football. You're going to need to have it tested by a professional. And last but not least, this deals with capital gains taxes. And anytime we've got someone making a net adjusted profit of $250,000 or more, or for a couple, it would be $500,000 or more. That's maybe right now. Those numbers could change based on different tax code as we go throughout time. That's a capital gain. And a way for a property owner to avoid paying taxes to the government on that is to put it in a 1031 tax exchange program, which allows them to buy other real estate within a certain period of time, and again, legally avoid paying tax on it. That concludes our our national question and answer. And now we're on to the 2 remaining videos about the state question and answer for review.